Are you familiar with the term possessor consciousness as theorized by Paulo Freire and how it applies to the Israeli settlers in the West Bank? Let's explore it a little further. In discussing his understanding of the oppressor class against the so-called oppressed, Paulo Freire talks about how the oppressor consciousness is structured. And part of it is how they have internalized the logic of their own privilege. Now, I had previously covered it in one of my lectures in my series in Paulo Freire, and here is a snippet from that lecture. He's explaining the dominant possessor consciousness. And this consciousness is something which we have previously learned that it is inherited. And it has already internalized a certain logic of its own privilege. And that is what becomes their worldview, right? So whenever, if the peasants rise, if the oppressed rise and try to change the system to the oppressor consciousness, to the possessive consciousness, that comes across as an integral threat to their collective and individual selves, right? Because here is what they think, right? What they think is that they are the ones, even if they don't rationally talk about it, they think that they have the right to life more than the others, that they have earned it, right? And that if they have gotten somewhere, and if they are rich and prosperous, it's because they are more innovative and they work harder than others. These are all the rationalizations, latent and blatant, that they use, right? And because the oppressed have risen and are asking for more rights, since that challenges their individual and collective identities, so the rationalization that is given is, first of all, that these people are ungrateful. We have done so much for them, but there is no way we can make them happy. And two, they are undeserving, because the poor are poor because they didn't work hard. It's their own fault. So that blaming the victim's mentality is at play. So if you think about what I just shared with you, the oppressor consciousness is also a possessive consciousness. Since they grew up in a system where they have the right to own and have whatever they want, they internalize that. And hence, anyone else who lays claim to the same things as they consider their own possessions becomes a threat, is posited as a threat. Another instructive thing in the snippet that I shared with you is that it is generational. I use the term inherited, but what Freire means is that this privileged possessive consciousness is generational, because if I belong to the possessor group and believe in all the systems and privileges that it gives me, I will pass on to the next generation who will grow up thinking the world in the same way, especially if their thought processes are not complicated by outside knowledge. So what we gain from this is that the oppressor group always has this ideal belief that what they want or possess or desire is theirs to have, and anyone who claims otherwise is an impediment, must be controlled or removed. Now you can see this possessor consciousness operative pretty much at all levels of the settlement movement. People who live in settlements, even though they are on Palestinian territory, which was captured in 1967, believe that they own that land and that the Palestinians are trespassers and a nuisance. that's why they can justify to themselves the collective violent actions that they take against Palestinian villagers. They can even justify them to themselves destroying their crops, burning their houses, right? Because this possessor consciousness has already pre-decided for them that they are the actual owners of that land, and Palestinians who have lived there for centuries are outsiders. Now, obviously, this possessor consciousness is partially religious. I mean, these people are reading their own sacred texts and claiming that God promised them this land, and hence the Palestinians who have lived there for thousands of years are still outsiders. It is also important to remember that the Palestinian people who live in Gaza and the West Bank didn't just happen to be there by accident. Some of them already lived in these territories, but majority of them are the people who were evicted from their homes in 1948. Remember, 700,000 Palestinians were evicted from their homes. Some of them went to Gaza. Some of them went to what is now Jordan. Some of them were force-marched to these territories. These people have that claim to that territory and to the lands where they live. Another claim that is made by these settlers is that not just that God gave them this land, but also that since they captured this territory, it is theirs to keep. Now, that goes against any international laws about occupation. We live in the 21st century. It's not the century of conquest, unless you're Russia. And even that is not accepted by the world. You cannot just capture territory, call it your own because God promised it to you, and then force the people who live there to leave. But this is the possessor mindset that drives the settler movement and is now a major influence in Israeli politics. Since settlements were established, people grew up there, generationally, they think they are the ones who should own it and who have a right to that land. And hence the Palestinians are outsiders and can be removed and should be controlled. All of this is underwritten by this idea that even though the settlers are newcomers in that territory, the territory belongs to them. They possess all that it offers. And anyone who lays an equal claim to it needs to be controlled and eliminated. And that, unfortunately, happened to be Palestinians. Now, let us look at two figures, prominent figures in the settler movement. So the person on the left is Itamar Ben-Gvir, right? He is the security minister of State of Israel. The person on the right is Daniel Awais. Now, Itamar Ben-Gvir is from the extreme right-wing group of politicians currently in the Israeli government coalition. Daniel Awais looks like a wonderful grandmotherly figure, is one of the leaders of the settler movement. Both of these people are anti-Arab, and if you read their statements, I mean, if they made those statements within United States, as polarized as United States is, majority of people would find them disturbing and deeply racist. So here is what they have said to the media or in public. I'm just going to share just brief snippets of it with you. And this is Anita West as interviewed by Financial Times, and this is her view about the Palestinians. We're talking about over 2 million people in Gaza. And she says, and I quote, "All the Arabs will be out of Gaza, and Gaza will be a Jewish area. Let them go to Africa, Turkey, or Scotland when they are not so condensed in one place, maybe they'll be better. Let's go to Mr. Gavir. And he says, and I quote, "We are the landlords here. Remember that. I am your landlord." Now, he said that in public while addressing the Arab citizens of State of Israel. Now, both these people openly in their interviews display their racism and their disdain for the Arab citizens of Israel as well as the Palestinians living in Gaza and West Bank. In one of the interviews, when Anita West basically says these people should be removed, the interviewer tells her, "Isn't that what is termed ethnic cleansing?" And her answer was, "You can call it whatever you want." So what is at stake here? Not only that there are settlements in the West Bank, but they are politically connected at the highest level of Israeli government. And that they have developed this possessive consciousness materially, right? Because they have the power to go and build settlements, right? And then control the Palestinians. And since they have a religious reasoning behind it, they have a sense of ownership to the land, which is passed on from one generation to another. And in that process, then, when their consciousness, when they look at the land and see it as their own, automatically then the Palestinians are unwanted human bodies. So if this possessor consciousness, if you challenge it anywhere in the media, or if the Palestinians challenge it, since the entire edifice of their identity, social and individual, is built in this belief system, an individual act or a collective act by Palestinians isn't just one act, it becomes a threat to this entire identity, this entire consciousness. And to be honest, the Palestinians don't even have to do anything, just being there. If a person has a possessive consciousness, such as Mr. Gavir and Ms. West, just the presence of Palestinians there will become a threat to their own idea of self and integrity. So when we go into this possessor consciousness, and Freire really explains it deeply, because what he's trying to say is that why is it that the oppressing class, in this case the settlers, see the world in which they live as their possession and hence believe that they have a right to arrogate to themselves all its resources and even instrumentalize human bodies to achieve that? It's because they have deeply, materially, they have lived in a condition where they have that kind of arbitrary power. So if you look at the settlers, first of all, they can go establish settlements illegally against international law in Palestinian territory. 2, they are protected by the Israeli armed forces. The Palestinians have no rights. While the settlers have the civil rights under the Israeli government, the Palestinians around them are governed by the laws of Israeli occupation military. So that inequality that exists for the settlers, that's the norm. So what happens in that possessive consciousness? They already religiously think that this land is theirs. So hence the Palestinians are an impediment to their acquisition. But beyond that, that possessor consciousness makes it almost impossible for Israeli politics or their leadership to even work towards peace, because working towards peace for these settlers means losing what they possess, what they believe to be their own. These two figures, about whom I briefly shared, a couple of snippets of what they've said, are prominent figures in the settler movement. And the settler movement now isn't a fringe group. It can make or break governments. So since Oslo II, even though State of Israel had built the wall on the Green Line, which was also partially a land grab, instead of pulling back the settlements, they have increased the settlements into the West Bank. Now, Ariel Sharon had dismantled the Gaza settlements, and you can read the political reasoning behind it. But by allowing illegal settlement of the West Bank, the Israeli government has trapped itself into this powerful possessive consciousness and its political acts and its ramifications. Because now, since the settlers have lived there and lived there over generations and developed this idea through religion and through actually acts of living there and making a life that this land is theirs to use and to pass on to their children, and that those who are not part of their in-group, the Palestinians living there, are a nuisance, are a population that needs to be controlled and eventually removed. And that's why these people, Daniel Aves and Itamar Ben-Gvir, they can openly say that. And Ben-Gvir is on record saying that any Arabs living inside of State of Israel, if they are not loyal, they should be expelled. So what that possessive consciousness has done is it has underwritten the aggression in the West Bank by the settlers, by establishing settlements, and then by attacking Palestinian villages, burning properties, killing people. But it has also made it harder for the State of Israel to negotiate a peace. Knowing this possessive consciousness is important for you and me. I live in the United States, right? If we take these people out of their context and place them in the United States on a podium, and if they make these kind of statements about any constituency in the United States, may it be Muslims, African Americans, Latina people, we will all be up in arms saying this is racist, right? Because we are attuned to a kind of politics where even if you are Trump, there are certain lines maybe that you cannot cross. But these people not only can make these statements without caring about millions upon millions of Palestinian people, but have no qualms about it, have no moral quandary about it. And that is underwritten by the possessor consciousness of the oppressors. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I hope this was useful to you. If you're interested, I have a whole series on Paulo Freire, so you can watch it and maybe use it in your understanding of the world. I think it's a really, really important book to read, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In a moment, my playlist on Palestine will come up. Please see if you want to explore my engagement with Palestine further. I'm deeply grateful for your support. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.